How many animals were on the ark? Have you ever heard a skeptic claim that there's no way the biblical account of the flood and Noah's ark could possibly be true because there's no way Noah could fit millions of species on board the ark? Hi, I'm Tim Chaffey, and we're here at the Ark Encounter today to answer that question. The first thing we need to consider is what species were actually required on the ark. Because when the skeptic throws out this number of millions of species, what they're not telling you is that that includes all of the plant life that has ever been identified. And Noah's not required to bring the plants on board the ark. It also includes all of the insects that have ever been identified. Over 1 million species of insects, over 400,000 species of beetles alone. And Noah doesn't have to bring those on board the ark because they can survive a flood and they don't fit the description of the animals that are described in Genesis chapter 7. And it also includes all of the marine life, which is where the vast majority of life on earth is in the oceans. And if you think about it, during the flood, there was a pretty big ocean out there where all of the marine life could still survive. In fact, the whole world was an ocean at that time. So when you run the numbers and you try to figure out how many animals were required on the ark, you're left with 40,000, roughly 40,000 land-dependent species. But Noah didn't need to bring 40,000 species of animals on the ark. He needed to bring the kinds. What's the difference between a kind and a species? Well, the Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 1 that God made the animals to bring forth after their kind. And so we would expect that if the animals, the various animals that can interbreed, then they would belong in the same kind. Now, we're often told that's the definition of a species, and yet we know there are so many examples where that's not the case. For example, with dogs, we've got wolves and coyotes that are classified as different species, and yet they can interbreed. Noah doesn't have to bring wolves and coyotes and all the different species of foxes, dingoes, and all that. He just needs 2 dogs. So the number of kinds is obviously going to be much lower than the number of species. But the kind is roughly equivalent to the family level in our classification system, which is not as specific as the term species. So there are fewer families and fewer kinds than there are species. So how many kinds were there on the ark? We estimate there are about 1,400 kinds of animals that were required on board the ark, and that number is probably an overestimate. Let me give you an example from bats. There are 18 living families of bats in the world today, and another 5 or 6 extinct families of bats that have been identified. Now, we strongly suspect all of those bats belong in the same kind based on their anatomy, based on other features, the things that they're able to do. We really do believe they're from the same kind, but we didn't have all the information that we needed to prove that, and so we had to separate them out into 24 different kinds of bats. Every time we had a decision between a lower number and a higher number, we went with the higher number. That was our approach to this animal kinds thing and the total number of animals, because if the higher number can fit, obviously the lower number can fit. So we have over 300 bats represented on board the ark. It's possible Noah only needed about 7. So we likely have an overestimate in the number of kinds, which is just under 1,400 kinds, which gives us a total number of animals of fewer than 6,800 animals. And again, that's probably an overestimate. So how could all those animals fit and everything else that they need to bring on board the ark? Well, to find the answer to that, why don't you check out another video that we did on how large was Noah's ark.